Oh, I didn't see you there. Hello and welcome back, Sentient Beans. Today I am doing the top 10 most common misconceptions about Buddhism. And it came from this comment right here. I'm pretty excited, so let's do it. Number 1, you have to be a vegetarian in order to be a Buddhist. Let me just say right off the bat that you do not have to be a vegetarian in order to be a Buddhist. There are monks in Tibet and they live in places where vegetables and fruits aren't easily accessed and bought, and so because of that, they actually have to eat meat in order to survive. There's absolutely no rule. There are monks and sanghas in Southeast Asia where they do alms and they take offerings, and they can only eat what other people give them. So if people give them meat, they have to eat that too. Now, for people who do have a choice, however, the Buddha recommends them to not eat meat to cultivate compassion. Because when you eat meat, you are propagating the market of killing and slaughtering animals in order to feed the appetite of the people who like to eat meat. And if we put ourselves in the animal's shoes, we probably wouldn't like it if we are killed and slaughtered for our meat. And what the Buddha teach is fundamentally that we are all connected and we are all the same, regardless of whether it's a lion or a cow or even an ant. We are the same. We all want happiness and we do not want suffering. So because we are the same, because we are brothers and sisters, we do not want to harm each other. And therefore, the first precept in Buddhism is no killing. And kind of a caveat to no killing is to start by being a vegetarian. So it's completely okay if you're not ready to be a vegetarian yet. These are just suggestions and guidelines in order to be more mindful and to be more compassionate. Otherwise, you can always start by eating what the Buddha called the 3 pure kinds of meat. Link in the description below. Number 2, Nirvana is the end goal for all Buddhists. Now, this is very interesting, and the goal of Buddhism is not Nirvana for all schools. There are essentially 3 different schools or types of Buddhism. There's the Theravada tradition that's mainly in Southeast Asia. Then there's the Mahayana schools that exist mainly in the north, in China, Korea, Japan, and that region of the world. And then there's the Vajrayana tradition that came from Tibet. Many people say it's essentially Mahayana. So these 3 different schools actually have different goals. Mainly the difference is between Theravada, or the small vehicle, and Mahayana, or the great vehicle. The Theravada tradition is what most people in the West here think is all of Buddhism. In the Theravada tradition, the goal is to be enlightened and achieve nirvana and become what's called an arhat. An arhat is someone who has achieved nirvana and is pretty much living in eternal state of bliss. Think of it like the best meditative state you've ever felt, and that is, like maybe 100 times that, and they're living in that state indefinitely. So it's pretty nice. Nirvana is peaceful, and there is the absence of desire and attachment and any kind of form and feeling. So the Theravada tradition, the practitioners of that school, the goal is to be an arhat and achieve nirvana. Very few actually go on to become a Buddha. That is not most practitioners' goals. Only a select few can become a Buddha. The Mahayana tradition, however, does not stop at attaining nirvana and achieving enlightenment for oneself. The Mahayana vehicle, the greater vehicle, you go on to help others attain enlightenment as well. So their path is a little bit different, where in Theravada you work on mainly yourself, attain arhathood and kind of stay there, where Mahayana you cultivate yourself and at the same time you aspire to help others, and when you can help others you go and actually do things that benefit all living beings, and because of that it is called the great vehicle, and great because it is embracing of all living beings, not just yourself. So the definition of a bodhisattva is an awakened being. So you not only are awakened, you also go and help others achieve that same awakening. Now that's what's amazing about Buddhism, is that neither is better than the other. It just all depends on your preference and where you are now personally in your life, and where you want to be, and what your goal is for yourself. That's why there is 84,000 Dharma doors. The Buddha created all these different types of methods to help you get to where you need to be. And it's just like there are so many different kinds of medicine. You use different kinds to cure different kinds of maladies. So basically, nirvana is not the end goal for all Buddhists. Due to popular culture, a lot of people just assume that Theravada tradition encompasses all of Buddhism. So that's not the case at all. The end goal for Mahayana Buddhists is to become Bodhisattva and then ultimately a Buddha. Again, it's just based on your preference, which school you choose to follow. There's no right and wrong answer. Number 3, Buddhism equals meditation. Now this is a big one, and I wanted to bring this up because here in the West, with Buddhism being a fairly new concept, people still think, especially those who aren't familiar with Buddhism, that it's pretty much just meditation is its main form of practice. Now, this is not too far from the truth. Meditation is a key part in practicing Buddhism. However, it's definitely not the only thing that comprises Buddhism. A lot of it has to do with learning and studying the sutra and what the Buddha said, as well as doing good deeds and following the precepts of only doing good things with your body, speech, and mind. So there's the action, there's the studying and gaining knowledge, and then there is also meditation. So if you're only a meditator, you can't say that you are a Buddhist, because there's a lot more to Buddhism than just meditating. You can be a non-Buddhist and still be a meditator. Meditation is simply a tool, just like if you use a fork, you can use a fork to eat pasta, you can use a fork to eat salad. At the end of the day, it's just a tool. You can use it to do anything that you like, but it doesn't belong in any one school in particular, and it definitely doesn't define all that there is in Buddhism. Number 4, the Dalai Lama is to Buddhism like the Pope is to Catholicism. Now, this is a fun one. I think it's partially true and not completely accurate to say that the Dalai Lama is like the Pope, but in Buddhist form. Again, like my last point, there are different types of Buddhism, different schools of Buddhism, and they each, a lot of them have different traditions and therefore different masters that they follow. If you are of the Theravada tradition, it's likely that you won't think of the Dalai Lama as your master. I practice a Pure Land tradition, and I still think of the Dalai Lama as a spiritual leader and an inspirational figure, but he is not, say, the ultimate leader at the pinnacle of this hierarchy or system like the Pope is. The Dalai Lama is essentially a political and spiritual leader of Tibet. The 14th Dalai Lama, or the Dalai Lama that's living today, he has fled Tibet and now lives in India as a refugee to escape from China's control. So right now he doesn't have much political power. It's still a very sensitive relationship between Tibet and China. It is an unfortunate situation where he can't go back to his people for fear of his life, essentially. So I would say it's not exactly the same. The Pope, the Dalai Lama isn't like the Pope, but it is more applicable as a comparison in Tibet and not necessarily in other forms and schools of Buddhism. Number 5, the Buddhists believe in a soul that reincarnates into another life form after death. So there's a lot of misconceptions about reincarnation in Buddhism. It's not the same kind of reincarnation that you think of when you hear about the pharaohs or even like pop culture. Essentially, there is no reincarnation in the traditional sense in Buddhism because there is no such thing as a soul. There is no soul that actually passes into the next life. So more accurately, the Buddhists call this process rebirth. And essentially what happens in rebirth is that what you are right now is a bundle of different kinds of energies and molecules and atoms, thoughts and actions. And so all those together, when you die, when your body no longer functions, those energies move onward into another life form. However, you can't really think of that as a soul because it's not in essence you. Because what is you? There is no one thing that is who you are. It's just like looking at a rushing river. You may look at this river and then come back the next day and still see that the river is still running, is still there, and so you think this is the same river, but it's really changed since you last saw it the day before because the water is constantly flowing, but because it's so smooth and it leads from one moment to the next and it seemingly doesn't change much, we think that this is the exact same river. Same thing goes for our self, and what we believe is me is that there is no one thing that is the self. The self is comprised of different causes and conditions that brought it to be what it is. Without those external factors, without our society telling you what to think, how to dress, who you are, whether you're male or female, you would not have the same concept of self as you do now. And if your definition of self can be changed so easily, can you still call that one complete thing in and of itself if it can be changed by external factors? So, what the Buddhists say essentially is, or what the Buddha taught was that there is no such thing as the self. And because there is no self, you cannot have a soul that migrates into another body because it's not the same you. Interestingly, too, the things that you do or say in this life and even think contributes to your karma, and that karma is a collection of those energies that you send outward that will dictate kind of your rebirth and also the things that will happen to you. So it's like throwing a ball against the wall. It will certainly bounce back to you. And so karma is not so much fate as it is just cause and effect. So I will go more into this later. I think I've gone into karma a little bit before, but it's really interesting. And if you want to learn more, let me know in the comments below. Essentially, there's no such thing as reincarnation. Rebirth is more accurate because there's no such thing as the self, and therefore there's no such thing as the soul. Number 6, Buddhists are passive and quiet when it comes to resolving conflicts and social issues. So that hasn't always been the case. I feel like this comes from many people perceiving Buddhist monks as very quiet and unmoving and constantly in a state of meditation. And the perception maybe is that they just don't care and that they only care about cultivating themselves and finding their inner peace, and whatever happens outside of their meditation hall is or are other people's problems. That is just not true. That is just not true. Just because someone is not doing something about an issue does not mean that they don't care. In Buddhism, we kind of see things a little more future-oriented and far-sighted. The Buddha taught that things happen for a reason, and that because we cannot see all parts of the puzzle, we can't say whether this is right or wrong. Of course, it's always unfortunate to see other people and other living things get hurt. But because the Buddha taught the law of cause and effect, that things happen for a reason, it makes a lot more sense, and you can start to see things around you more logically rather than emotionally and wanting to act and help right away. Now, this is, I feel, a big point of contention in the West, where people don't necessarily believe in previous lives or future lives. They think everything must be done now. Children are dying in Africa. Help the people who are affected by the flood. We need to feed the homeless. We need to do all these things. And the reason why we don't see a lot of Buddhist monks out there doing charity work is that they believe in the ultimate form of helping, which is by, helping them be enlightened, and so that they don't actually have to go through this again in their next life. And how do you help other living beings be enlightened is to enlighten yourself. By enlightening yourself, you will have the wisdom and the know-how and the powers to essentially come back into this world and more effectively spread the knowledge and help others essentially we want to get to the root of the problem, which is greed, anger, and delusion. Like I said, the three poisons that brought them into that situation in the first place. So, you know how the saying goes, give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he will live to eat a lot of fish. Number 7,